Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another Teach Kevin Your Thing session. In today's session, I'm going to be introduced to a very new validation library called Vine. And my teacher is Harminder. How you doing, Harminder?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you for you are a returning teacher to TKYT. So thank you for another session with you. The last session we had was on AdonisJS. And
Yeah,
it seems from that time till now, you've been working on something really new. But before we get into it, could you please introduce yourself and tell us who you are once again, what you've been doing, and anything you are willing to share?
yeah, sure. So, as you already shared, my name is Harminder Virk. I am from India, and I'm the creator of a new validation library called Wine. And Wine is as I mentioned, it's a validation library that you can use in your Node.js applications. So, anyone who has been building web apps will be used to of validating the user input either manually or by using some other validation library. And WineJS is again something you can use to achieve the same task, that is validate the user input, validate forms in your applications. So that is what I've been working on.
Oh, awesome stuff. So I'm curious, really, what was the inspiration behind the name for this library?
Behind the name.
Yeah, the name is because I've said it to myself as Vine Jazz, but you call it wine. So I guess it's not what I was thinking, right? So you just tell us a bit about it, the name.
Yeah, so it's like wine, which is some sort of a plant that is used to make basically grape wine. That's pretty much all. The I would say. So that what wine actually means,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no specific reason to use this name apart from it's a simple name, anyone can pronounce it, it's easy to get the domain and all that stuff. So that was pretty much
Mm.
the reasoning behind using it.
Ooh, I like it. So yeah, um why did you think you because according to the backstory for wine, you sort of abstract it out from Adonis. Of
Hmm.
course, there are other validation library out there, which is the elephant in the room, which is Zod. So, what
Yeah.
was the inspiration to like, we need to get wine out of Adonis and let it be usable by anyone who's writing a Node.js app in 2023 and beyond. So, why did you do that? What was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, we already had a validation module in AdonisJS since 2015. So even before Zod was created, we had our own validation system within the framework, and the entire code for the module was, I would say, framework agnostic. It was not using anything specific from the framework.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought maybe we can improve the validation layer, we can add more features to it, and at the same time we can take it out of the framework and let anyone basically use it, even if they are not using Adonis.js. So that was the reason behind it, and also why we not use Sod, and why we decided to even continue building, or I would say maintaining our own validation module. And there are few reasons behind it, but the most prominent one is the performance. We have some benchmarks on the WineJS website. So if you go over there, you
Mm-hmm.
can see WineJS is around 8 to 9 times faster than Zod. So performance is one, and then there are some other trivial reasons why we wanted to maintain our own validation library.
Mm, interesting. So performance. I saw the benchmark, and wine is running circles on Zod, and yeah, it's really really good. So from your understanding, what are you doing differently to gain so much in performance in One.js?
Yeah, so I think the biggest impact is we pre-compile your schemas.
Mm-hmm.
whereas Zod does not do that. So with Zod, when you define a schema and when you use that schema to run the validation, they have to like pretty much reparse the entire schema and then perform the validations. Whereas with Wine, when you define your schema, we compile it into a JavaScript function,
Mm-hmm.
which is like highly optimized for performance. And when you have to perform the validations, you use that pre-compiled function to run the validations. This is where I think most of the speed improvement happens. And then I think there might be some things like, for example, we built Wine for performance. So we, like took care of even tiny bits to make sure that Wine is fast. I think with Zod they don't have that focus, so maybe they are, like not optimizing the things which they can even optimize, even if they are like not pre-compiling the schema. So yeah, that's pretty much like where we gain most of the performance.
Interesting. So I guess you have a pre-compilation step, which is making
Hmm.
the wine schemas into a highly performant JavaScript function, which you then use for the validation instead of the actual schema written by the user. Is that correct?
Yep, yep,
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so unlike Zod just uses schema directly. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really cool. So, just for the sake of educational purposes, how what is the need when you're building Node.js application for validation library? You touched on this already for forms, but how very important? Like, why can't I, as a developer, just write my if type of string and all that stuff? Like, why would I need a validation library to like make things easy for me?
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think there could be like a few reasons behind it. Very first, like if you're doing all the manual validations with
Mm-hmm.
like if conditionals, then very first you will end up with a lot of spaghetti code, meaning you have like all these checks written in line within your code, and you
Mm-hmm.
might be like repeating yourself. And if you don't do that, if you, let's say, like build an abstraction where you have these functions like, is this value a string, is this value an email, and then you reuse those functions, then you're like pretty much creating a simpler version of I would say, like a validation library for your project. Whereas when you use a library, whether it's Wine, it's Zod, or it's anything, you offload all that code that you have written inside within your application to a third party package, and you can reuse it. And if that code has any sort of bugs or security issues or performance bottlenecks, someone is going to report that within the package and it might get fixed and you will like benefit from it. So those are, like pretty much the reasons we try to use third party packages for most of the things we are trying to do, unless it's very specific to our domain or to our business.
Mm, perfect. Yeah, so I really appreciate this sort of libraries because for example, we have Anchor in sales, and because of Anchor, I don't have to write if for my all the things I'm expecting from the user. So my actions are really very just precise and do their stuff because they just take care of it. So yeah, let's see wine really in action. Like I want to see how it works, the syntax and everything and all the goodies you could do. You did mention, I think we had a conversation before now that is type safe. I know everybody liked that kind of thing, so we're going to see
Yeah,
how it improves DX. So should I share your screen now?
yeah, sure.
Okay, nice, nice logo. Okay, now I'm going to ask another question. The logo,
Yeah,
what
sure.
is it? What is it? I think it's like an
Again,
asterisk. Is it?
yeah, it's an asterisk, and again, like there is
Mm-hmm.
no deep meaning behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, like I was sitting playing with a couple of designs,
Okay.
and I ended up liking this one with like actual word mark, which is VineJS, and
Okay.
yeah, so I decided to like use it. No deep meaning behind it.
Okay, okay, that's fine. I like it. So yeah, we are in your docs. Docs looking good. Really, really good docs.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Let's go spicy a little bit. Could we start with the benchmark, please?
Sure. So let's click on
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
and
Okay.
uh,
Okay, before this benchmark, I haven't seen Yop before. So from your benchmark, I'm assuming these are like two of the other strong players in the validation library ecosystem. Is that it?
yeah, and they also have
Okay.
like pretty much the same
Okay.
API for defining your schemas. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say if you're already using something that looks like wine,
Okay.
and if wine can like perform better than them, then you might be like more inclined towards using wine, because like the schema API is pretty much the same. You're not like losing any I would say DX or the kind
Mm.
of API you want to write. So that's the reason like I went with Zod and Yup is also like really popular, and it was created before Zod, if I'm not wrong.
Okay. Cool. So, what are you measuring in this graph?
Sure. So, very first, like we have all the benchmarks on GitHub. So if you like
Okay.
click on these links, it will take you to a README, and then from there we have like link to the source code to the actual benchmarks. In this particular graph, we just like take a very simple object where we have like a couple of properties, and then we ask Zod, Wine, and Jup to validate that object. And once like the benchmarks is done, Wine is able to like run 9.45 million operations every second, and this is on like my machine, which is M1 Mac.
Mm-hmm.
And Zod is able to run 1.19 million, whereas Yup is running like 410k operations
Mm.
every second.
Wow. That's what is that? Almost 80% or what from Zod?
Yeah, I think so. No, I think it will be like way more than 80%. Like
Oh wow.
from Zod,
Yeah.
it's for Zod, it's like 8 times, or
Okay.
roughly like 9 times.
Yeah. That's
And whereas with Zod, I think it will be like 16 times. Sorry, from Yup, it will be
yeah.
like 16 times faster.
Oh my god. Oh, wow. That's a lot. And like you said, this is owing to your pre-compilation step, which makes sense. So yeah, this is really good in terms of performance. I'm sure the JavaScript ecosystem is going to love Vine because we are so faster, everything. So this is this is gonna be fun, and I really like that you stuck to the DX of Yop and Zod. So it will be not too much work for a team who's already using Zod to want to like move to Vine because the DX is similar, just the inner workings that differs, right?
Yep. So like the high
Mhm.
level APIs, if you look at them, they are almost the same, especially with Zod. Yup
Mhm.
has like more like Yup has slightly different APIs. For example, everything in Yup is optional, and you have to like use the required method to make the field required. Whereas with Zod and Wine, everything is required by default, and if you want to mark it optional, you have to call like the optional
Okay.
method on the field. So Zod and Wine are like more similar than Yup and Wine.
Mm. Interesting. Cool. So, yeah. So let me let you lead right now. I'm done with my round of questions, but some will come up as we go. But let's see.
Sure. So maybe we can, like just look at the syntax a bit, just to understand like how everything is set up. So you like just install Wine, and then you import the Wine object from the package, assuming like you're validating an object. So you define an object by saying wine.object, and then you define the properties that you want to validate, and then within these properties, like you can define their types, and then you can chain on additional validations, which can be on the format or the length of the field. And out here we have like a simple explanation of it, how a wine schema is set up. So
Mm-hmm.
you define like the shape of the data by creating an object, then you define individual fields, and then you define how each field like the type of each field, and then you
Mm,
can chain additional methods to perform validations or mutations, whatever you want.
mm,
And the best part is you can also add your own custom validations. So right now on a string you can validate the length, but you can also add your own custom methods to it. So let's say if you want to make sure the username is unique in the database, you can
mhm,
create a validation and like in one place, and then you can reuse that validation within your schemas.
Interesting. What's the confirmed doing? Is that custom or is that coming from? I guess that's coming from Wine, right?
Yeah, so confirmed is a method which will make sure that your object has another field with the same, like for example in this case,
Mm-hmm.
this validation will make sure that there is a field called password confirmation which has the same value as the password field. So that
Mm,
is what like confirm does. It checks there should be another field with the same name as this one, and with the underscore confirmation suffix, and both
mm,
of them should have the same value.
that's pretty neat. You are actually going a little bit deeper into being helpful because with the dot confirm, I think we mostly have to do that sometimes when a user is signing up. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mhm. So
Cool.
it's
So yeah, that's pretty much like how Wine looks at an, like at the higher level.
okay.
Maybe what we can do is I can try to run Wine inside an AdonisJS project right now.
Yeah, let's
I'm
see.
using AdonisJS because I'm like more comfortable with it, but you can pretty much use it with any framework that can run in the Node JS runtime.
Okay, cool.
So let me copy it, install the package.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
see you're only supporting ESM for
Yeah.
wine.
So Wine is like an ESM only package with Adonis.js, and like everything we are building around Adonis.js, we decided that we will like build everything that we are like creating for the future in like using ES modules. So we are
Okay.
not going to build anything for common JS module system, and everything will be ESM only going forward. Therefore, Wine is also ESM only.
Mm, that makes sense.
All right, so that's installed, and what I'm going to do is I will like create a route uh, that will like accept the user input, and then we will basically use Wine to validate that input. So let's say here we say post sign up. First, again, this is like all related to Adonis.js. If you're using a different framework, you can define the route the way you
Mm-hmm.
want. Wine has nothing to do with that. Let's copy all this. So I'll paste it here, move the import top, and let's call this function. Data will be request dot all. So this is how like you read the request body in Adonis.js. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, we will return it back. So let's run the development server. It's running. Let's open an API client that I use.
Okay. Insomnia.
And, yeah, maybe you know what? We can create a new request. Ignore that, like all the requests that I have right now. And here, let's copy this URL slash sign up
Okay.
request. We get an error saying it's a validation failure. Like this is how Adonis.js shows you any exceptions that are raised during a request.
Mm-hmm.
What we can do is either we can like wrap this code inside a try catch, handle the exception ourselves, and convert the validation exception to a response. So let's do that. Try catch and this inside the try block. here we will say if error is an instance of the validation error from Wine. So this is
Okay.
how like you can check if some error is an instance of a validation error specific to Wine, and this errors object is an import coming from VineJS. If it is,
Okay.
we will use the response object from AdonisJS to send response. So here I will say error dot status send error dot messages. Otherwise, we will like just read through the exception and AdonisJS handle it.
Okay.
So if you go there, we still have the same error. That feels weird. Let me see. We're doing a validation. We got the data. Then we're catching the exception. Oh, sorry. I have to put a return here. And here we can see the validation errors, which are coming
Mm-hmm.
from Wine.
Yeah.
So these are like the default error messages. You can override them. You can also define custom error messages. So, but for now, let's make a request and send some data. So I will say username,
Mm.
another field, call email, field, password,
Yeah.
secret at the rate 123. Now, as you were, like talking about that confirmed method, this is what
Mm-hmm.
like it does. So we only have the password field, but we get an error. It says like we want another field called password confirmation.
Yeah.
So let me retype the same password. Everything's good. Now we get our validated data back.
Interesting.
Also, if I go back to my editor and I like hover over it, you can see we have like all the type information. So
Mm.
once the validation is done, you can see, okay, username is a string, email is a string, password is a string.
Yeah. Quick question. Can we customize the order field respecting what if I'm using common casing, for example? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
cool. That
if I
would be
get it right, what you're saying is if let's say this was user underscore name,
no the
but
okay. I'm mostly concerned about the password. The password confirm is looking for password underscore confirmation. What if we have password uppercase C?
oh
How
yeah,
do
yeah,
we,
yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, you can do that. So here you can say like the password confirmation field
Oh,
name
yeah.
is,
Smart.
let's say we don't, yeah, we like don't even want that. We say
Mm-hmm.
repeat password.
All
Yes,
right. Smart.
give it a run. It gives an error. Now we say repeat password, and everything works
Mm.
fine.
Nice. Smart. I like it. That's really good. Okay.
Cool. So what I'm going to do next is like remove all this try catch stuff we have here, so that
Mm.
when we like create more routes, we don't have to repeat ourselves,
Okay.
and instead move this exception handling to a global exception handler that AdonisJS has. So I'll go to this global exception handler, and I'll write my code here. So this should be CDX. And let's do this. Let's clean up some code from here. Let's remove this response and return the output. This way, if we are like creating more routes, we don't have to do try catch every time. The
Okay.
exceptions will be like handled globally by using this exception handler, which is again not related to Wine, it's related to Adonis.js,
Okay.
and everything works. Yeah, so that's how like a basic example of Wine looks like. But right now we are not getting all the performance gains of Wine
Mm-hmm.
because we are redefining the schema on every request. So every time the request comes, this callback will be called, and we are redefining the schema inside the callback.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want like all that good part of performance, we have to move it from this like the request handler
Mhm.
out here on the top. You can move it to a different file as well. And you have to wrap it inside wine.compile.
Okay.
Now, once you compile a schema, it's not a schema anymore. It becomes a validator. So I will say create user validator
Okay.
and use that validator here. So that's not all.
Mm.
Now, if I go over the refactoring one more time, we moved our schema out of the request handler. We
Mhm.
wrapped it inside a method called wine.compile, which returns a validator, which means we don't have to use wine.validate anymore. We can
Mhm.
just use that validator and call the validate method on it and give it the data that we want to validate. So this is how it looks like. Let's rerun our code. Everything works fine. Let's get rid of this field and we have a validation error. Yep, everything looks good.
Mm. Interesting. So, how would this look in a controller setting? Because right now we have everything on Raps.ts. So let's see how it
Mhm.
looks in a Adonis controller.
Sure. So let me create a controller. NodeJs controller. We'll call it register
Mhm.
and go to this controller and define a method here called store. And I'm going to paste all this here. Access to the request, which we can as our first param here. And next we need this validator. So what I'm going to do is I will move it inside a dedicated file. So app validators create user validator.ts. Let's copy paste all this to that file. We have to export it and import. So now we have like a dedicated file from where we are exporting our validator to create a new user.
Mhm.
And next, I will update my route to use the controller we have just created. So, and we want to call the store method. Yep, it looks all good. Says we should prefer lazy loading it. Yeah, so that's like just a ESLint error that AdonisJS has a thing called where you can lazy load your controller. So it's giving us an error that we should lazy load the controller instead of
Mhm.
uh, doing a regular import. But we won't like get into that. We can like just ignore it for now. And let's import our validator. Yep, this is how it looks like. So we have our route, which uses this controller. Inside this controller, we are using our validator to validate the request body, and this is where the validator is defined.
Mhm. Cool. Nice.
And like the good part about TypeScript is you can pretty much like click on everything and jump to that particular file.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think this looks really really nice. So for this sort of DX, for every um validation you want to do, you just have to create a new file in the validators folder. Yeah, and just define your Vine schema, which will be compiled and
Hmm.
which gives you like a validator, and you just use it. That makes sense.
Yeah,
So, okay, you mentioned we could customize the message. That's always been really cool to see.
sure. So let's jump to the documentation. I can like first try to explain how
Mm-hmm.
the workflow of custom messages is managed in Wine. We have got this thing called message providers, and a
Okay.
message provider can decide from where to read the messages and how to resolve them as the validation error happens.
Okay.
And the reason we have this message providers because depending upon the kind of application you are building, you might need like more flexibility than
Mm-hmm.
just defining your error messages as an object. Let me like give you a more concrete example. Let's say if you have an application which is in like multiple languages,
Mm-hmm.
and you want your error messages to be translated as well. So if someone is like viewing your website in French, they should
Mm-hmm.
like get the French error messages. If someone is viewing it in English, they should get the English error messages. So what you can do is you can create a custom messages provider that integrates with your translations workflow, like whatever library you are using, and it can like resolve the error messages using that translation library that you're using. So this is why like this entire layer of messages provider, we are going to use like a very simple workflow for now, using this class which Wine gives you called simple messages provider. So what I'm going to do, I'll copy this and let's drop it here for now. Let's import this class, and we have to define one more object. And now, like just try to check if our custom error messages are being used or not. So for this particular one, let's say if we enter an invalid email, so we say foo, it says create user validator is not defined. Wow, let's see why.
Okay. Okay.
So from this particular file, we are pulling in create user validator. Yep, it looks fine to me. This also looks fine to me. Weird.
Yeah, I think you're kind of away from your mic, so it's getting muffled again. Yeah.
Okay, can you
Yeah.
can you hear me fine now?
Yeah.
All right. Let me.
So
Yeah, I think maybe the code changes were not picked for some reason.
okay.
Yeah. So right now we get the error message. The value is not a valid email address. Exactly what we have defined
Mm-hmm.
here. Now, if we
Cool.
remove this from our custom messages, we will get the default error message. It says the email field must be a valid email address, which is like different from what we
Mm-hmm.
have defined here.
Yeah. So one other thing I noticed, for all validation, you send a 42, but probably some frontend is they're expecting like a 400. Is that like something we could change, or it's just the way it works with Vine?
Yeah, so like the place where you are handling the exceptions, you can go over there and you can like set whatever status you want.
Mm.
Right now, I am picking that HTTP status code from the error object, but if you want, you can like let's say set it to 400.
Okay.
Let's give it one more run. Why we have another error,
Okay.
and now we get like 400.
Cool. So this is not Vine specific, just the framework you're using, whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Cool. I like it. That's good. That's pretty neat. Any other goodies you want to show?
Yeah, like as we're like talking about error messages, there is also one more thing that you can do with this simple messages provider, is that you can define different field names for your fields. So let me
Mm-hmm.
like give you an example. Let's say we are validating a field called first underscore name. So
Mm-hmm.
let me update our schema, and out here I say first name, and it should
Mm-hmm.
be a string. And if we run our validation, we get an error which says the first name field is required. It
Okay.
will be nice if you can like actually convert this field name to be more like human readable and not
Yeah.
using the underscore. So what you
Mm-hmm.
can do is inside this second object, you can say uh, like use first name like this for the first underscore name field. And now if we try to
Mm,
run it again, we get first name field is required. So you can pretty much like customize the field names
mm,
inside your validation error messages.
yeah, that's good. That's pretty good. So
Yep.
I see you. Do you have a way to set like a let's say like a default value for fields?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So uh, how you can do that is maybe like at first I can show it to you and then I can tell you why we
Mm-hmm.
went with like this approach.
Okay.
So we have this method called parse, and inside this method you can, let's say, return a default value. So you get the input value as an argument, and here you can
Mm-hmm.
say if input value doesn't exist, then I want to return, let's say, foo. Otherwise, I want to return the value.
Okay.
And
What is it complaining?
yeah, that was redundant. So if you go ahead, I'm not sure if the changes are being picked again. So if you say f, let's do a quick console log here just to see what we are getting. Right now, it's not working because it has to be negated. So if you don't have a value, then we want to use foo. Otherwise, we want to use the value. So
Okay. Cool.
let's run it. We don't have the first name error anymore because we are using the default value. Let's fix the email error as well. And here you can see we get the first name with the default value.
Oh,
Now,
interesting.
coming back to why we have like this parse method instead of having something like default where you can define a default value.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason behind that is there can be like many scenarios in which you want to use a default value. For example, you want to say, hey, use the default value if the field is missing, or use the default value if the field is null, or use the default value if something else is in like certain state. Now, instead of having like so many methods to represent different scenarios, we have like this one method called parse, which runs as like the first thing even before the validation begin, and you can do like anything you really want to do. If you want to convert something to uppercase, you can do that. If you want to trim white spaces, you can do that. Like you can do like pretty much anything inside this parse method,
Okay.
and defining a default value is like one of many use cases for using this method.
Cool. So you just have like a callback that you could do stuff before the validation, and one of those stuff is like returning a default value if there's no provided value. That's really cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
cool. So yeah, that's how you like define default values in Wine.
Okay, so how about a list of accepted, possibly accepted values? Like how do you do that? Like let's say role we have like admin, super admin, or just guess something like that. Like how would we do that?
Yeah. So we have a data type called enum. What you can do
Okay.
is, let's say we have role wine.enum, and here we can say the user can be an admin, the user can be a guest, or they can be a moderator, let's say. And if I go back, rerun the validation, uh, very first, like it says, the role field is required. So I say
Mm-hmm.
role, and I pass here foo. We get an error
Mm,
like the selected role is invalid, and these are like your choices, which is admin, guest, and moderator. And the
okay.
best part is, if I go back to my controller, uh, and right now it says role is any, which is weird, I think, because this has to be constant, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, and now you have like actual type. So it says the role is admin, guest, or moderator, like actual strings. And if I try to, let's say, write a condition, role is equal to, let's say, super admin. TypeScript will give me an error because it's saying it's not possible to have a super admin role because the validator will not allow it. So I have to say admin, and now my condition is valid.
Yeah, that like we have that type thing going on. That's really nice. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with is there something like a union going on? Like let's say it could be a number or a string, or how exactly would that work for certain values like that?
Yeah. Uh, I can, like maybe first try to explain how do we have like conditional validation in Wine, and then maybe we can
Okay.
go ahead and
Mm-hmm.
uh, do an example, because I think
Okay.
it's like a very very core and very specific way we handle conditionals.
Okay.
So as you mentioned, we have these unions, and
Mm-hmm.
unions are basically, let's say, if we look at this example, this is how you define, or I would say express, a
Mm-hmm.
union in TypeScript. So if you say I have an object, either it can have these two properties, or it can have these two properties, or these two properties. And how you define this in Wine is by writing conditionals. So you define a union, and then union is basically a collection of conditions, and next to every condition you have a schema. So if that condition is true, Wine will use that associated schema to perform rest of the validations. And if that condition is not true, Wine will like move on to the next condition and move on to the next condition until it find the one that matches, or otherwise it will like give a error.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at this example, this is how we like define um, a union of objects, I would say. So
Okay.
we say wine.group, which takes like an array of conditions. Then every array item is a conditional. So here we say wine.group.if, and we write our condition, which is a callback. You can write pretty much whatever you want here. And then you tell which schema to use if this callback returns true. Then we
Mm-hmm.
have next condition, then we have next condition. So this
Oh,
is how you basically do conditional validations in Wine. Now, the example that you are talking about, uh, that is something can be a string, or it can be a number, or it can be
yeah.
a boolean, or it can be a string. We have a shorthand method of doing it so that you don't have to write those conditionals by hand. And for that, you use this method called union of types. So if you have a field which can have like distinct data types, for example, it can either have a boolean or a string. These are like two unique data types. One is boolean, the other one is string.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you have a value, uh, sorry, like let's say if you have a field which can be a number or a string, again these are like two distinct unique data types, then you can use this method called union of types,
Yeah.
where you don't have to write conditionals by hand. Wine can write those conditionals for you. So let's like use this as an example. So I'll copy this field and paste it here. So what we are saying is we have a health check field where either the value can be a boolean or it can be a string. If it's a string, then it should be a valid URL. So go back, rerun our validation. First, we get an error. So let's define this field. And let's say if we pass a boolean here, everything works fine. If we say false, still works fine. And if we say foo, then it fails because it's a string, but it's not a URL. So the rest of the union validations are occurring after the value is
Mm-hmm.
a string.
Interesting.
If all
Cool.
this like if all this like makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does
And
really make sense.
yeah. And also, like in your types, the same thing will be reflected. The health check can be a string or it can be a boolean. So you have
Mm-hmm.
like the same type information.
Cool. That's really good stuff, really.
Yeah, that's like a really neat way to write conditionals and have like type safety at the same time.
Yeah, cool. I like it. Thank you. Any other thing you want to show? Because I think I love the DX already. I've written a tiny bit of Zod, but Vine. I think the only part that is specific to Wine, which you've mentioned before, should be like the dot compile. I'm not
Hmm.
sure Zod has that. I haven't seen it though, so probably it doesn't. But yeah, and also probably the way it would do union types might differ, and also the way you do defaults as well. So it's a little bit, not too much a great learning curve, but just if you want to like have some fine grain control, you will just need to
Yeah.
like learn the specifics like the dot parse, the union of types, and the dot compile, which is I think, like you said, the way to get the performance benefit of wine is when you use it. So and of course, you just have to define that when you're defining your validators. So yeah, that makes sense. So any best practices, gotchas to look out for when working with wine? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think there are like any thing that you can really, like that you really have to keep in mind apart
Mm-hmm.
from like pre-compiling your schemas. So
Okay.
maybe it can happen that you start writing code, you start defining your schemas within your route handlers. That is like one thing that you should be aware of. Your validator should be like not defined within the request handler. They should be defined outside of it. You pre-compile them. Apart from
Mm-hmm.
that, I think all other APIs are built in a way that you cannot like really abuse them, or like can get wrong with them.
Okay.
Again, union of types is like another one, but it will like give you an exception if you are misusing it. For example, you cannot use union of types for doing a validation like the value can be an email or it can be a phone number, because in both the scenarios the data type of that value is a string. So
Mm-hmm.
these two are not like unique types. The type is a string.
Okay.
But in that case, like wine will like throw an exception saying that, hey, like the unions that you have provided, they are not unique, they are not distinct, so you cannot use them together. That's like one thing to take care of. Apart from that, I think all the APIs are pretty much straightforward and you can like hardly get wrong with them.
Mm, cool. That's awesome. Thank you. So yeah, is there anything else you want to show on wine, or we should just wrap up pretty quickly?
Yeah, maybe I can like just take you through
Okay.
some of the bits which are like specifically different from Zod. One
Okay.
is like the error reporters. So in Wine, uh, we have like this layer called error reporter, which is responsible for defining the format of your error messages. So right now, we get these error messages as an array of objects, and then each object has fields like message, rule, and field. So if you don't want this format, let's say you're following some API spec and you want your error messages to be formatted as per that spec, you can create a error reporter for that. And here we have, like a very simple and working example of how you can create one from scratch. So you define a class which implements an interface. Then you have to like define these two properties and one method, two methods, sorry. And then you can pretty much decide how your error messages should be formatted. Once you have defined your error reporter, you can assign it to Wine like this.
Mm, cool. That's really good.
Yeah. That's one thing. Another thing is you can also create custom schema types in Wine. I'm not sure if you can do that in Zod. Last when I checked, it was not possible.
Okay.
But here in this example, what we are doing is we are creating a custom schema type called money, which validates the value. So which like basically does a validation making sure that value is a number and then convert it to a money object using this library called dinero.js.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So you can like pretty much like go through the entire example, see how it works. But once you're done, you get this method called wine.money to define a schema type representing like money currencies and amounts in your application.
Mm, cool. That's really handy because, of course, there are times where I just need to have my own custom schema or
Yeah.
validation. Yeah, that's really handy and really thoughtful. So yeah, thank you.
Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much all like I wanted to show
Mhm.
related to wine, unless you have any specific questions.
No, it's like for such library, you would know if you have a ton of DX to learn where I just keep poking for like, oh, okay, but everything is just there. Yeah, intuitive. I could just okay, yeah, dot string, dot URL, and all that kind of stuff. And I really love the fact that you have custom messages, which is really, really good. And of course, for the TypeScript folks, you're type safe. All right, you get to see all those um editor uh, autocomplete and stuff like that. I really think is good. So yeah, anything you want to plug so far? Like anything at all that you want to share as a plug for teaching me wine today?
Uh, I don't think like I really have anything to plug apart from the
Mm-hmm.
thing that I built, wine, which have like we have like already covered.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe like if there are people looking for a Node framework, which is like fully featured, batteries included, maybe they can give AdonisJS a look
Mm-hmm.
and see if they like. We have built AdonisJS pretty much with like on the same principles
Mm-hmm.
as we have built VineJS on. So yeah,
Cool. Yeah, thank
that's
you.
pretty much all.
Thank you, Amanda. So where does folk reach out to you? Want to talk to you about wine, Adonis JS? Where should I go to find you?
Yeah, so we are on Twitter, like for AdonisJS, with the handle Adonis Framework, which is like all like one word, no underscores or spaces or anything. For
Mm-hmm.
me, you can say I'm on work one. Again, it's like one word, and maybe like we can share those handles in the
Definitely.
in the description.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, for sure. So thank you so much for your time, Harminder. I really appreciate it. And wine really looks awesome. Thank you for all the amazing tools you've built, like Adonis, Japa, which we haven't talked about, but it's a really good testing library. I love it. So yeah, and now WineJS. So thank you so much, Hamid.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and letting me like take you through wine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.